Alright, what's going on guys, and welcome back to another breakdown video. So I'm going to be breaking down the trade that we took this morning with the team. This morning we took some gold sells, as you guys can see here, played out for a 1-3 risk to reward. So as you guys been seeing the previous breakdown, the previous trade that I've been sending out in the free telegram inside the VIP team as well, we've been holding a win streak for a very long time. We've been holding this win streak already for almost a month and a half. We're about to go into the 2-month mark, and I'm going to show you guys the results that we've been pretty much holding this entire month of October. This is probably, I think this is one of the biggest win streak that I've been holding, throughout my whole entire trading journey, trading career. This is probably one of the biggest win streak that I've been holding so far. But check this out. I'm going to show you guys the entire, results that we've been having from October. I believe October we only had like 6-7 losses. So check out from October 1st, already starting off the week or the month already with a big trade, which was a 1-3 risk to reward. But just check out all the losses that we have been taking, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losses is what we take in this month, right? You guys can just pretty much see that the losses are just simply a negative 1% risk. And then you guys can see all the wins, right? Minimum of at least a 1 or 2 point R risk to reward, right? And then obviously we do have some big trades that we caught earlier this week as well, earlier this month. Like on last week, we did catch a very big trade with gold, which they played out over 440 pips, which was over a 1-7 risk to reward. This week, right, we did catch some big trades as well, which was yesterday. We did catch over 330 pips, which was the analysis that I showed you guys last night. And then this morning, we caught another big trade, which was over 270 pips, which was a 1-3 risk to reward. So as you guys can see the track record from October, we've been killing it. We've been literally holding this win streak for a very long time. Let's go back to the other month, which is September. Just look at all the entire wins that we've been pretty much winning from September. Back to back to back to back to back, right? You guys can see all of these wins here are big risk to rewards. Some losses, right? Some break-even trades, right? We go back to October, and then we have all of them from July, right? But you guys can clearly see every, the win streak that we've been holding already for almost a month. So I'm going to be breaking down, the trade that we took this morning. I'm going to show you guys the results that I was able to do inside the account management that we're currently holding right now. So this morning I was able to bring in over $5,792. You guys can see this. I don't know if you guys are able to see that. Let's just wait for it to clear up. There you go. This was the profit that I was able to bring in this morning. And then you guys can see obviously that this continues to be a live account. So this is currently the trade that we've been, or the account management that we've been, trading for the past couple months, right? So big trades in this one we've been holding. Very nice, and we've been actually holding this win streak for a very long time. So with this setup, I focus on 2 major time frames, right? We're gonna focus on the higher time frame, which was the 1-hour time frame, and I also focus on the 4-hour time frame, right? So as you guys know, obviously we trade the New York session. The New York session is the only session that we do trade. Sometimes we do trade the London, but New York session is where we find the best results, right? The best pattern that actually aligns with our system, with our strategy, right? So in the 1-hour time frame, I want you guys to focus on 3 simple candlesticks, right? We have this bullish candle, we have this pin bar candle, and we also have this bearish candle, right? This pattern right here with the candlestick, if you guys know how to read the candlesticks, right? This candlestick right here is called the shooting star. So shooting star basically is a potential bearish reversal, right? Now, like I've been telling you guys the past couple breakdown videos, right? I've been explaining to you guys that obviously gold has been completely bullish, still haven't really shifted the structure from bullish to a bearish market, right? So if we go from higher time frame, you guys can obviously see the trend continues being bullish, right? Being healthy bullish, price action is just giving us a pullback towards major zones, but price action just continues to hold, and you obviously respect all of these entire buyer bias, right? So going back here in the 1-hour time frame, like I told you guys, this was pretty much the first signal confirmation that we received from last night, right? So during the London session, obviously we did see that price action had a big impulse move towards the upside, forming a new all-time highs, right? So these all-time highs here were formed during the London session, which was set around the 42.18, right? Now, if we go down towards a 30-minute time frame, I also want you guys to focus on these 2 30-minute candles right over here, right? So we have this bullish candle, obviously, that created this new highs over here, and then we also had this bearish candle, which obviously attempted to continue breaking higher. So on the 1-hour time frame, we did see that obviously price action formed a shooting star, which is a good confirmation already showing us that sellers potentially can enter the markets, right? On the 30-minute time frame, we also see that price action is failing to break above all of these entire highs over here, right? So it's already showing us that price action is slowly dying the bullish volume, right? Meaning that sellers are slowly stepping into the markets. We go back here towards the lower time frame, 15, 5-minute time frame. You guys can also see how price action build a resistance zones right over here, right? So very simple. We had an impulse move towards the upside. We formed a new all-time highs. Price action attempted to continue breaking higher, right? But obviously, logically, all these entire buyers from these entire zones, for example, these zones here, these zones over here, these zones over here, this is exactly where buyers started pretty much taking their profits, right? Because again, like I've been explaining to you guys the last breakdown, the 3 ways that the market have reversals, right? Obviously is 1, if it's overbought, 2, obviously if it touches a previous structure, or 3, with the new session, right? Now, since we don't have previous past structures over here and we didn't have any pretty much big impact news last night, this over here, this entire push towards the upside or this entire push towards the downside, right, the reversal, was simply buyers obviously taking their profits, right? Now sellers obviously stepping into the markets. Whenever buyer takes profit, seller steps into the market, right? Whenever seller takes profit, buyers are stepping into the markets, right? So very simple. So we already understand that these 2 time frames over here, like the 1 hour and the 30-minute time frame, we already formed those, entry candle confirmations, right? The 1 hour, we have the shooting star. The 30-minute, we have obviously the attempted towards the upside. Price action managed to close underneath, which is already a good sign, right? So going back here towards the 15-minute time frame, as you guys can see, I do have this green box here, or this green circle. This green circle here is going to be considered as obviously the major highs, also with aligns with the London highs, right? So this is pretty much the London session highs, right? Which is going to be set at these all-time highs here, which is at 42.18 zone, right? Or 42.16, 42.18. Now, price action, obviously, once we formed this, we had an aggressive push towards the downside, right? Now, once we had this aggressive push towards the downside, this is exactly, if you guys go here towards the 30-minute time frame, I want you guys to notice this entire gap. This gap from here all the way towards here. This gap towards here already builds up a bearish fair value gap, right? Very simple. And if we go back down over here on a 15-minute time frame, we also build up another bearish fair value gap, which is going to be from this zone towards this zone, right? It looks better on the 5-minute time frame. The 5-minute time frame, it shows it clear. So going back over here on the 5-minute time frame, you guys can clearly see this entire bearish gap, right? This here is a fair value gap as well. Another way to say is going to be a supply zone, right? This is originally where sellers started stepping into the markets, right? This is where we first saw the first seller opportunities, right? So very simple. We had the push towards the London session. Buyers attempted to continue pushing higher, but the volume started slowly to die, right? Obviously, we have the confirmation from the 30. We also have the confirmation from the 1 hour time frame. Now, if we go back towards the 4 hour time frame, which is another good confirmation, right? On the 4 hour time frame, we did see 2 4-hour candlesticks closing underneath these entire major highs. So we have this candle, which was the Asian session candle, and then we also have the next candle over here, which was the London session candle. And then you guys can see how the Asian session created a new all-time highs, formed that resistance. The London session candle, right, came back towards these exact zones, attempted to break higher, failed, and closed underneath. So this confirmation on the 4 hour time frame as well was another good confirmation. So again, we have the 1 hour morning star, we have the 30-minute candles over here, which is obviously attempting to break higher, forming that resistance on the lower time frame. The 4 hour time frame, we have obviously this wick rejection towards the upside. Price action attempted to break above and then managed to close underneath with a nice bearish candle closure, right, on the 4 hour time frame. Now, going down towards a lower time frame. So now that we pretty much got the bigger picture, understanding exactly how price action was rejecting, looking at those entry candle confirmations, this is what I'm going to be talking about now, where we're going to be marking up our zones. So whenever price action has a reaction towards a major levels, right? So for example, in this case over here, we rejected off a major highs. We had a bearish reaction. And then I want you guys to focus on this candle right over here. This big bearish candle, notice how it had an impulse move towards the downside, right? Leaving a huge gap with all of these entire previous candle. And if we go here on the 15-minute time frame, 5-minute time frame as well, we can clearly see how the market had properly broken out of this entire structure. So if you guys notice the structure from the previous market, we have all of these entire previous higher lows, right? Which obviously continues holding the bullish volume, right? And then the good confirmation for us for obviously seeing the market having potential shift of structure is simply breaking out of all of these entire structures. So in this case over here, we managed to break under previous higher low. And then notice how the higher low right here turned into an area of resistance, right? So all of this happens from a lower time frame. So this was already good confirmation, right? From obviously from the London session going into the New York session, right? So the London session pretty much gave us a clue what can potentially happen during the New York session, right? So if we go back all the way over here where we did see the shift of structure, right? I want you guys just to look at it from a 1 minute time frame perspective, right? So you guys can see the 1 minute time frame perspective. We went from creating these highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. We created this high, right? Simply not a lower high or a higher high, because these highs over here equals to the other ones, right? So simply equal highs. Buyers attempted to break above. We have the confirmations from all of the candlesticks from the 1 hour time frame towards the 30-minute time frame, right? Then we have the nice break of structure. Price action broke underneath the structure, formed that area from previous support, turning into an area of resistance. Going into the 15-minute time frame, right? If we go back here in the 15-minute time frame, I want you guys to notice how price over here on the 15 as well build up a nice bearish fair value gap. Going back towards the 5, which also looks clean. You guys can see this bearish fair value gap as soon as price action had that broken structure. So once we build up this nice fair value gap over here as well another supply zone, like I told you guys earlier, this is exactly where the first initial sellers started stepping into the market. Perfectly sold off towards the downside. So all of this entire move towards the downside did happen during the London session, right? Now, during the London session, if you guys notice this huge wave towards the up downside, right? If we're going to focus here on the 30-minute time frame, I want you guys to notice how price action just simply bounced it off from this entire fair value gap over here, which is the bullish fair value gaps, right? So bullish fair value gap was being built, obviously, because again, the trend is still overall bullish, right? So notice how price action is just simply reacting off all of these entire fair value gap or reacting off this previous supply or previous demand zones, right? So for example, these zones over here was previous demand where buyers, initially stepped into the market. Price action came back over here to pretty much fill up all of the missing orders that happened over here. And exactly, price action perfectly rejected all of these entire orders over here, which obviously maintained the bullish bias. Now, this maintained the bullish bias from the higher time frame, right? So now we're pretty much, trading with the intraday time frame. We're not focusing on the higher time frame because obviously the higher time frame we continue trading bullish, but on the lower time frame we are seeing some structure, being shifted from the bullish to going bearish, right? Now we've seen this entire huge rejection towards the downside, right? And price action perfectly respecting or rejecting off all of these entire lows over here and closing above all of these entire structures over here. Obviously, this is where it kind of gets tricky, right? Because obviously with gold, we're still very much bullish and we are respecting all of these entire demands where buyers has initially stepped into, right? Now, obviously during the early or late London session, early New York session or pre-early New York session, we did see that buyers had previously stepped into the markets, right? Clearly, you guys can see the move from here all the way towards here. Now, this is where I started looking for my selling opportunities, right? Simply why? Simply because price action, first thing first, we came back towards these 30-minute time frame fair value gap over here. And then notice how buyers, once price action stepped into these exact zones over here, this is exactly where buyers started slowly dying off. You guys can see how it kind of built up all of these entire resistance inside this entire supply zone. So if we go here back into the 5-minute time frame, we perfectly came back towards these entire 30-minute fair value gap. Price action is perfectly trading inside this entire supply zone. Then notice how sellers immediately stepped into the market. Buyers stepped in and then sellers stepped back in. Right, you guys can clearly see how this entire resistance was being respected. So this entire resistance over here was being respected. This happened during the early or pre-early New York session, right? Which is going to be set around the 42.03. And once we build up this entire resistance, then notice how price action, which is basically ranging from one point towards the other point, right? Pretty much, the volume from the London session slowly dying in to merge into the New York session, right? So this is exactly where price action was simply ranging from one zone towards another zone. We had a fake out towards the downside, price action went back inside the range, and then price action once again had a nice break towards the downside, right? Now, this is exactly where I enter my first position, right? If we go back here on the Telegram channel, we're going to go to the first trade that I took, which was the sell. This sell here happened at 9 in the morning, right? I told everyone to resell because we also took a sell position during the London session, which happened somewhere this was the sell that we took during the London session, but price action failed, right? Obviously, we respected all of these entire demand zones over here, where buyers, initially stepped in once again, and then obviously we got stopped out of break. We got stopped out of stop loss, right? So that was a failed setup that we took during the London session, right? Obviously, we waited for price action to do the same exact thing. So once again, we got all of these entire highs, and then price action broke structure, came back towards these major zones over here, which obviously price action was selling off from, right? Now, the first trade that I took was simply a break and retest setup, right? So if we go here on the 15-minute time frame, I just want you guys to focus on how price action, right? Once we came inside this entire supply zone and we started seeing those confirmation from the lower time frame, I just want you guys to focus on this entire broken structure. So if you guys go here on the 30-minute, on the 15-minute time frame as well, I want you guys to focus this entire support right here. This is exactly where I took my first entry, which was simply a pullback. If I show you guys a drawing, we have this initial move towards the upside, the pull in the this entire fair value gap from the 30-minute time frame, and price action coming back towards this entire fair value gap. Inside the fair value gap, obviously on the lower time frame, there is supply zones, right? Supply zone is where obviously sellers are stepping into the market. So this is exactly the setup that we took. Price action came over here, we rejected off that supply, and then we finally had that broken structure. That broken structure is showing us that the volume from this lows over here, or from this bullish bias, right? So we go back here in the charts, from this entire bullish bias over here was slowly dying off. So the buyers that stepped into the market from here or here, they started taking their profits back above this entire structure. So we came back towards the previous structure, which is supply, right? This is where buyers started stepping into, or buyers started slowly dying off, right? The volume. Seller were respecting all of this entire supply zone, right? So obviously from the first move that happened over here, price action came back to obviously have the retracement, retest these zones over here to make sure that obviously it is valid. This over here was another good confirmation, and then we finally got that broken structure of a lower time frame. So what we simply did for, right, the first entry was simply a break and retest setup. Price action broke underneath all of these entire previous lows, and then we got the pullback towards these areas, and this is exactly where I took my first entry, which was the retest. So if we go back here on the 30-minute time frame, I just want you guys to notice this 30-minute candle. This 30-minute candle right over here, so if I kind of clear off this entire over here, because we do have a mess here. So if you look at this candle here, this candle was the confirmation candle, right? So we simply pulled back towards the areas of interest, and I want you guys to notice how price action perfectly had a wick rejection towards the upside. So if we go back here on a lower time frame perspective, right, you guys saw the 30-minute how it closed, right? So this was the 30-minute candle closure. We go back here on the 15-minute time frame. We did see that buyers or that sellers, whenever price action came back towards these exact zones over here, which was the demand zone over here, this is where buyers once again slowly started dying off. This entire structure from right over here was being respected. Sellers were respecting all of these entire zones. You guys can see this, right? Perfectly break and then retest coming back towards these areas of interest. Now, my entry candle, once we broke underneath this entire structure, obviously this is where we started setting up the limit. This is where I told everyone sell the market, right? This happened, or my bad, this was over here. This happened at 9 in the morning. This is where I told everyone to sell the market. 41.88 was my first entry. Once we pretty much had the broken retest, this was my first entry at 41.88, and then I also had another entry a little bit higher, which was to retest this entire broken structure, right? And as well with this entire lower time frame fair value gap right over here. So price action perfectly broke structure, came back, retested all of these entire zones, and that's exactly where we entered the market. So we took the first entry there, and then price action obviously came back towards these zones over here. If you guys notice from the left side, notice how we just simply bounced off from these entire demands. Because again, this entire wick rejection from the London session is still showing us that buyers are still in the market. We're still attempting these entire zones. We attempted buys once again in these areas over here, which obviously price action did end up respecting. Cool. So this was the first sell, right? We did end up hitting over 100 pips, right? We did get stopped out with break even with this trade. So 100 pips off this trade perfectly, right? Now what we waited next, we go back here inside the Telegram. You guys can see that this is exactly where we did hit every single take profit. I told everyone I'm sending out another signal, which was the sell limit now at 42.06, 42.09. Now 42.06 and 42.09 is a little bit higher, right? It's going to be a higher time frame. It's going to be a higher zones over here. So the setup here, we focus on the 30-minute fair value gap from these zones over here. As well, the second setup was also still focusing on these entire zones over here, but now we're going to be focusing on a lower time frame or 15 and a 5-minute time frame fair value gap as well. So we focus on the 30-minute, which was this entire major fair value gap as well major supply zone. And then we came back to retest the initial supply zone. This is exactly where the seller previously stepped in earlier during the London session. So over here, obviously, this is where, let's say that, 80% sellers stepped into the market, right? Well, let's just break it down part by part, right? So imagine 100%. This is the first percentage that seller stepped into the market. Price session came over here. This is the second percentage that the market stepped in again. The seller stepped in. Over here, this was the third percentage, and then we finally had the fourth percentage, right? So once price session pretty much cleared all of this entire fair value gap from the 30-minute time frame, notice how price session broke above structure, but then we came back to retest these entire zones over here. Now, obviously, buys over here does not make any sense. Now, the reason why buys over here does not make any sense over here was simply because, once again, we came back to retest major supply zones. This entire broken structure towards the upside, this is where a lot of buyers, obviously get, stopped out, simply because they're trading that simple break and retest setup, right? But they don't focus on how price action is having that rejection from the major supply zone over here, which was the initial sell-off. So if I would have taken a break and retest setup above these highs over here, obviously I would have easily gotten stopped out, because there's still no clear sign that buyers were stepping into the market, right? Obviously, we respected all of these entire zones, but what matters more, right? Obviously, the higher time frame structure matters way more than the lower time frame structure. And if we go back towards the 4-hour time frame and the 1-hour time frame, we can see how the market was just clearly bearish, especially with the 1-hour time frame with this entire signal candlestick, with this entire signal sticks, right? Very simple. And then we also as well with the 30-minute time frame, supply zones over here. So clearly we were still bearish with the market. We were to simply be bullish if price action would have broken above all of these highs here. But this simple push and break above these highs here was simply liquidity grab. So if you guys go into towards the 30-minute time frame, I want you guys to notice how price action perfectly grabbed liquidity towards the upside. We grabbed liquidity towards the upside, broke above these highs over here, which was simply, liquidity grab, and then coming back to retest the major supply zone, the major initials where sellers step into the market. So very simple. This is exactly where I told everyone to set up a sell limit, 941. And then obviously at 10 o'clock, this happened 20 minutes later. We did went active, and as you guys can see, we did end up hitting every single take profits. We end up closing out this position at 270 pips at a 1-to-3 risk to reward. The target that we end up targeting was obviously under these lows over here, which was the London or the New York session lows, right? So this were the New York session lows, were obviously this entire demand zone. Now, notice how price action perfectly respected this entire demand zone, which obviously showed that buyers did end up winning for the day. So this was a simple setup that we took this morning. Just focus on these two supply zone. Obviously, whenever price action has the initial move towards the upside and we leave in entire gaps over here, it's very important to come back. Whenever you see a pattern like this, it can also be bullish, right? If you guys kind of see this on the bullish side, it can also be bullish as well. We had the push towards the upside, and then price action leaves an entire gap. We leave an entire gap over here, which has to be retested. Price action always have to be retested. This will be invalidated if price action would have inverse. If this entire price movement over here would have closed in above, then this entire move over here would have been invalid already, because now price action is showing us that this obviously fair value gap over here is no longer valid, right? Now we're going to inverse the fair value gap. So this is on the buy position, and then this is on the sell position. If price action would have broken above these entire structures over here, then the sell would not be valid for the day. So very, very simple trade that we took this morning. I hope you guys understand every single concept that we went over. Hope you guys took this trade. If you guys are in the VIP, you guys made a lot of money with this trade. We made a lot of money this entire week, this entire month, which I'm happy with the results. Happy that you guys are making money as well. So with that being said, tomorrow is Thursday. I'm going to be sending out a free signal inside the free Telegram. So if you guys are not in the free Telegram, make sure you guys click the link, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the New York session. Peace.